Analysis: Nanjing major fire rooted in real estate economy's predatory nature. Post-New Year, Chinese factories cease worker competition, tightens job market for migrant workers. China's real estate crisis escalates, fueling boom in debt restructuring sector and surge in hiring. Why Chinese consumers feel so blue. Chinese citizens mourn loss of loved ones, question government's concealment of epidemic. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Analysis: Nanjing major fire rooted in real estate economy's predatory nature. A devastating fire swept through the Mingshan complex in Nanjing's Yuhua district on the 23rd, killing at least 15 and sending 44 to the hospital, 2 in critical condition. The tragedy has sparked widespread outrage and brought sharp focus to issues of electric bike safety and property management failures. Local self-media in Nanjing, regularly suppressed by the Chinese Communist Party, suggests that while the catastrophe seems like an accident, it fundamentally points to the predatory nature of the real estate market. In detail, Mushi says, a local platform frequently targeted for censorship, digs into the root causes of the fire. It criticizes the quick blaming of electric bikes while ignoring deeper problems, like the midnight timing making emergency response harder and the bike's storage exacerbating the fire's spread. The question arises, how were these electric bikes allowed inside and left unchecked in such buildings? The crux of the matter is the building's design, crammed with residents and tenants, eerily reminiscent of a pigeon cage. The article highlights that the Mingshan neighborhood in Yuhua district is a resettlement housing project lacking in both quality education and public amenities. The cost of homes here is considered affordable, ranging from 15,000 to 17,000 yuan, approximately $2,363 per square meter. This is a bargain compared to the heart of Nanjing, where prices soar above 50,000 yuan, about $6,946, with the average hovering around 30,000 yuan, about $4,168, offering great value for the price, including lower rent. This neighborhood sits conveniently close to the city center, with a subway station merely 500 meters away, simplifying the daily commute for its residents. Such areas often serve as the initial stepping stone for many seeking to establish themselves in Nanjing. Yet, this very aspect is what lies at the heart of this tragedy. 1. The dense population of renters, many of whom eschew luxury vehicles for electric bikes, results in an overflow of these bikes. 2. Given its status as a resettlement area, the quality of property management is subpar, with minimal fees that are frequently challenging to enforce. 3. With a populace largely comprised of workers in a rush to get to their jobs, many seek shortcuts to save time, such as charging their electric bikes right on their living floors. This is because public charging can cost a few cents to a couple of yuan per hour, whereas home charging is significantly cheaper. A lot of these electric bikes are either pre-owned within the city or modified for increased speed. Many are equipped with counterfeit or expired parts, greatly escalating the risk of accidents. China, despite not being affluent and being the global leader in electric bike ownership with around 350 million units, poses a dilemma. If electric bikes were banned, how would people afford cars? On the surface, this might look like a simple accident, but at its core, it's the devouring nature of the real estate market at play. Even at 15,000 to 17,000 yuan per square meter, housing in Nanjing is deemed affordable, yet for the average wage earner at a private company in Nanjing, it's still out of reach. The piece reflects on how the author has previously addressed the suffocating effect of the real estate sector on societal energy and the undue pressure on the youth. Yet, the real estate market has trapped a significant segment of the populace for years, leading to a more inflexible economic structure and shrinking pathways for upward mobility. Moreover, it stands as a critical driver behind the expanding divide between the wealthy and the poor. The blaze ignited massive public fury, compelling Nanjing's mayor to issue an apology. However, Mushi says articulates that apologies do little for those lost. What's crucial is implementing effective strategies to ensure people can afford housing, boost the income of the younger generation, and tackle the criticisms facing Nanjing as a city entrenched in systemic issues. Post-New Year, Chinese factories cease worker competition, tightens job market for migrant workers. The Chinese New Year has just wrapped up, and migrant workers throughout the nation are on the hunt for employment. However, the economic slump has led to a significant change in the spring hiring frenzy at factories, where the once common rush to snap up workers is no longer seen, making the job surge even tougher for migrant workers. The Economic Observer reports that many migrant workers returned home for the new year, only to find making money harder than ever. Factories are cutting shifts to work 4 days, rest 3, slashing wages significantly. Moreover, the attendance at the village's card rooms during the new year has drastically fallen. The duration of fireworks on New Year's Eve in the village also was cut short from several hours in previous years to under an hour, illustrating the economic downturn in China and the downshift in consumer spending. In Guangdong, small to mid-sized manufacturers are pulling back on hiring, signaling a shift in the post-New Year worker rush. Luo Xiaohua, the head of Guangdong Meijia Group, which ships luxury bath products to the West, paints a grim picture for 2024. Just staying afloat is seen as a win, let alone growing. This cautious vibe is steering businesses toward tighter hiring practices. The past 10 years have seen the manufacturing sector employing over a quarter of China's 300 million migrant workers. But now, a sharp drop in factory jobs threatens the livelihoods of millions next year. With fewer orders and reduced operating capacity, factories are cutting shifts, slashing worker pay. Luo also pointed out that in 2023, a considerable number of factories were hit by a scarcity of orders, leading to schedules of working 5 days and resting 2, or working 4 days and resting 3. The China Enterprise Recruitment Salary Report released by Xiaoping Recruitment indicates that from the second to the fourth quarter of 2023, the average recruitment salary in Dongguan saw a decrease from the same period the previous year, with a reduction rate ranging from 1.3% to 3.4%. For young college graduates, the job market is equally grim. A trending topic on Xiaohongshu, akin to Instagram, reveals that securing a job often requires paying huge sums, with positions at major corporations and government entities commanding prices up to nearly $62,500. Many young people lamented, "If you don't pay up, you're not even getting in the door." Confronted with the grim prospects of unemployment, a growing number of Chinese youth are opting to lie flat, with many seeking spiritual intervention at temples hoping for a turn in their fortunes. Hits like "I Kneel in the Temple of the Wealth God" and "Can't Stand Up" have become anthems for this lying flat campaign, exploding in popularity on social media. The economic strain extends to retirees, who also feel the impact of China's faltering economy. With China's stock market on a downslide, coupled with a housing market crisis and unparalleled deflation, the economic outlook is bleak. The CCP's recent release of data indicates that China's Consumer Price Index, CPI, in January experienced its most significant drop in 14 years, with the Producer Price Index, PPI, also on the decline. A retired worker, Li Zheng, a pseudonym, from a smaller city in Hunan province, shared with NTD television around the new year that retirees like himself are acutely aware that the Chinese economy is truly in bad shape. China's real estate crisis escalates, fueling boom in debt restructuring sector and surge in hiring. China's real estate crisis continues to deepen, with developers defaulting on debts left and right. This mess has been a boon for debt restructuring firms, sparking a hiring frenzy in Hong Kong as they scramble to manage the fallout. A February 27 Reuters report highlights how big names like Alvarez and Marcel and Houlihan Lokey are bulking up their Hong Kong teams to tackle the crisis. Alvarez and Marcel, in particular, has taken on a key role with Evergrande Group, one of China's biggest real estate players, to manage its massive debt and asset liquidation. Their China team has grown from 200 to 260 in just a year, a clear sign of the times. Houlihan Lokey, known for advising giants like Evergrande and Sunac China, isn't far behind, with its team expanding by over 50% in the past couple of years. They're still on the lookout for more talent, signaling how dire the situation is. With around 20 Chinese developers defaulting on international bonds, the sector's turmoil is oddly creating jobs in Hong Kong's financial industry, a silver lining in an otherwise grim scenario. Chris Corcoran, a senior financial services manager at recruitment firm Robert Walters, notes a weekly uptick in companies needing restructuring advice, a trend that's only expected to grow through the year. While restructuring experts are in high demand, investment bankers in Hong Kong and mainland China are facing layoffs, a stark contrast that underscores the economic challenges and market downturns plaguing China. Why Chinese consumers feel so blue? Beijing needs an active consumer to drive economic growth, but Chinese households, with reason, do not want to play along. This perspective is detailed in the article Why Chinese Consumers Feel So Blue, which was published on February 27 and authored by Mr. Milton Ezrati, a chief economist at Vested, a communications firm based in New York. According to Mr. Ezrati, while the property crisis takes pride of place as China's biggest economic problem, the uneasy state of Chinese consumers is more fundamental and perhaps more telling. For years, even before the pandemic, Beijing talked about shifting the economy's emphasis from large-scale infrastructure investing, property development, and exports to the consumer. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, offered the same recommendation. But the planners in Beijing never made the adjustment, no doubt because the old economic emphases produced impressive growth figures that made the country's leadership look good. Now, with the property crisis, exports in decline, and a general debt overhang among local Chinese governments, Beijing has become desperate to bring on consumers. However, Chinese households seem to have little interest in spending as freely as Beijing needs them to, in many ways because of past Beijing policies. Every indicator says that Chinese consumers are not just reluctant to spend but that they are downright depressed. A survey conducted not too long ago by the People's Bank of China, PBOC, documents this ugly feeling. An index that the bank's statisticians have devised to weigh optimism on personal income growth against pessimism settled in this recent survey at a level of 49.7, down dramatically from 56 before the pandemic. In gathering these figures, the bank discovered that as many as 15% of Chinese households have suffered a drop in income, and an even greater number expect that to happen to them. Regarding employment prospects, some 43% of respondents said they were insecure about their jobs. The index that weighed optimism on property values was nearly 15% below pre-pandemic levels. A mere 15% of Chinese households expect property values to rise anytime soon. It is then little wonder that some 60% of Chinese households told the PBOC that they have prioritized saving over consumption, while barely 25% have prioritized the opposite. To be sure, Chinese people are culturally disposed to save, but these figures show a dramatic change from 3 to 5 years ago. The rise in bank deposits reflects this extreme mix of preferences. New deposits, already growing rapidly early last year, have accelerated into 2024, especially a willingness to lock up money in longer-term, better-paying deposits. The drive to save rather than spend is starkly evident in the fact that the Chinese paid down mortgages last year faster than they took them out, so the outstanding value of mortgages actually fell, which is historically a rare event. These trends have continued uninterrupted even as the PBOC cut interest rates. Clearly, those moves were insufficient to change behavior, not the least because the deflation in China has outrun the rate cuts so that even falling nominal rates pay a higher return in buying power than previously. The biggest contributor to the consumer funk by far is the property crisis. The collapse of major property developers has burdened financial markets with an overhang of questionable debt and accordingly reduced its ability to support the kind of business and job expansions that encourage consumer spending. Especially because millions of Chinese families had pre-purchased apartments from now-defunct property developers and will never see their homes completed, many Chinese have simply backed away from home purchases. Construction activity has fallen steeply, and property values have declined. Since some 80% of Chinese households own their own home, that drop in property values has hit household net worth hard, at once creating an aversion to spending and a strong motivation to save. Compounding the problem is how Chinese consumers borrowed in the boom years before the pandemic. Then, property values rose fast, encouraging mortgage borrowing and spending generally among those who already owned a home and felt rich as its value rose. Now, most of that debt remains, but its backing, the value of real estate, has declined. If this were not enough to make Chinese consumers wary, there is also the legacy of the zero-COVID measures pursued by Beijing through the pandemic and right up to the end of 2022. The seemingly arbitrary closures, lockdowns, and quarantines imposed by these measures have convinced many middle and low-income Chinese that their incomes are not as secure as they had previously thought and discouraged spending accordingly. None of these effects are going away anytime soon. The income insecurities left by the zero-COVID policy may lift relatively soon, but Beijing has only just begun to address the property crisis. It will take time and a lot more effort by the authorities to even begin to approach a solution, and it will take even longer for the legacy of these events and the debt overhang that they have created to begin to lift consumer sentiment. Mr. Escalates concluded that China has a long, tough road ahead, and for now, it must trudge without much help from the Chinese consumer. Chinese citizens mourn loss of loved ones, question government's concealment of epidemic. Here's the latest update on the pandemic situation in mainland China. As we've been continuously reporting recently, the outbreak on the mainland is becoming increasingly complex and severe. However, it continues to face strict censorship and cover-up by the Chinese government. Lately, a lot of Chinese online users have been saying they really hate 2024, grieving over the sudden loss of their parents, siblings, or other loved ones. It's been tough on many, including Ms. Zhou from Wuhan. Struggling with the pain of her mother's recent passing from a lung infection following a short hospital stay, she describes the ordeal as harrowing. Adding to her sorrow, her father succumbed to pneumoconiosis in December, just as pandemic restrictions were eased, a truth that officials sought to hide, even going so far as to threaten the denial of cremation services. Ms. Zhu said, "It's been utterly depressing. It feels like lights going out. Honestly, my spirits are so low." Many died when they relaxed the restrictions in December 2022, way more than the 90,000 reported nationwide. They listed my father's cause of death as sudden, even though it was COVID-19. It's been the same for many others, either marked as sudden deaths or attributed to other causes. From the fourth quarter of 2022, the Beijing Civil Affairs Bureau stopped releasing numbers on cremations. Jean Tao, a pseudonym for a Beijing local, suspects this lack of transparency hides a dark secret. Jean Tao explains, "I've known 5 or 6 robust individuals who suddenly passed, supposedly from heart issues, dying swiftly. The oldest was 60, but most were in their 40s or 50s, ages when they shouldn't just die off. The recent spike in deaths has to be pandemic-related. Everyone's on edge, especially those vaccinated, all left wondering how many have truly died. The government's silence and certain actions are downright despicable." Let us know your thoughts on today's topic by leaving a comment below. If you found this video helpful, please share it with a friend. It inspires us to continue creating more quality and reliable content. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting insights from China Truths. Thanks for tuning in.